No. Absolutely not. I am not being murdered by a decorative forest carpet with fangs before supper. Mara Valale stood in the rain with a lantern in one hand, a medicine bag cutting into her shoulder, and mud already inside both boots. The wolf blocking the cedar road was enormous, bleeding, and offensively inconsiderate. He lay across the cedar path like a fallen tree with teeth, silver-black fur, huge paws, a head the size of a bread oven. Blood soaked the mud beneath his ribs and steamed faintly in the cold rain. Mara stared at him. The wolf did not move. Do not look pathetic at me. I have already been chewed by weather, insulted by a goat, and betrayed by both boots. I am not adding heroic wolf rescue to the evening unless you plan to carry yourself. The wolf breathed. It was a bad breath. Wet, thin, dragging. The sort of breath that made healers sigh and decent people do stupid things. Mara swore at him for that. Then she set down her lantern and crouched beside him. If you bite me, I will take it personally. Up close, the blood smell mixed with something sharper. Metal. Poison. She pushed aside the soaked fur near his ribs and found a blackened silver shard lodged deep under the skin. Lovely, she muttered. Murder jewelry. Because apparently regular stabbing was too emotionally mature. She had seen trap wounds, knife wounds, and the work of men who claimed they only hunted for necessity while carrying blades polished like vanity. This was not ordinary hunting. Someone had wanted this wolf dead slowly. Mara looked toward the direction of her cottage. 1/2 mile. Uphill. Through mud. With a wolf who looked heavier than her stove. You are about to become a back injury with fur and moral consequences. Getting him onto her oilcloth cloak took 20 minutes and language that would have wilted church flowers. At one point she slipped, landed flat in the mud, and sat there breathing through her nose so she would not scream at the weather. The wolf remained unconscious through all of it, which was considerate only if one ignored the fact that he weighed as much as a tax burden. Mara tied the cloak corners to rope, braced the rope across her shoulders, and pulled. The wolf moved 3 inches. Are you full of bricks? No response. Dead kings are easier to move than you, and I have moved one. Briefly. Long story. Bad funeral. She pulled again. By the first bend in the road, she had decided he needed a name. Shouting at a nameless disaster felt rude. Also, if she was going to die of exhaustion on a forest road, she wanted the obituary to be specific. Beans, she said through gritted teeth. That is your name now. The wolf's ear twitched. Do not judge me. You are large, inconvenient, and I regret buying into your survival. Same as the bean sack I bought last winter. Beans fits. Somewhere beneath poison and fever, beneath torn wolf flesh and broken control, the Alpha King of Moonreach heard her. Cale Thorne had been called Sovereign, Warlord, Silver King, Oathkeeper, and, by one dying enemy, a cold-hearted mountain beast. He had never been called Beans. His wolf, half buried under pain, lifted its head. Mate? Cale tried to answer. The poison dragged him under before he could do anything but remember her scent, rain, rosemary, smoke, mud, and outrage. Mara got him home by spite. There was no other explanation. She dragged him across her threshold and knocked over the umbrella stand, a bucket of kindling, 2 jars of dried mint, and the stool she had been meaning to fix for 6 months. Beans came to rest half in the kitchen and half in the front room, like an invading carpet with internal bleeding. She stood over him, dripping rainwater onto her own floor. Welcome. You have ruined the entryway, frightened the furniture, and somehow made my cottage feel accused. Then she worked. Work made sense. Work had sequence. Boil water. Cut fur away. Clean the wound. Remove the silver. Do not think about how large the teeth are. Do not think about the way the poison smell burns your nose. Do not think about the fact that no natural wolf has shoulders like a knight's warhorse. The first shard came out with a wet scrape. The second was deeper. The third made Beans shudder so violently that one huge paw struck the table leg and cracked it. Mara pointed at him with the forceps. That table was already unstable, but you are still rude. His eyes opened. Gold, not yellow. not animal amber. Gold, bright and aware and terrifyingly focused. Mara froze with bloody forceps in one hand. The wolf stared at her as if he had woken inside a myth and found the only real thing in it. There was recognition in that stare. Hunger, too, though not for food. Something older, stunned and reverent, which was absurd because he was on her rug leaking on the floor. Mara narrowed her eyes. That expression is far too poetic for someone leaking on my rug. I am adding brain injury to the chart. Beans made a sound, not a growl, more like an offended thundercloud. Yes, very frightening. Hold still. She dug out the final shard. He went rigid, but did not bite. His eyes stayed on her face the entire time, and Mara decided this confirmed head trauma. Normal wolves did not gaze at healers like widowed poets. By dawn, he was bandaged, drugged, feverish, and alive. Mara washed blood from her hands and looked at the enormous wolf occupying most of her hearth. You are not staying. I do not run an inn for weaponized furniture. His tail moved once. Do not start. Beans stayed. By the third day, Mara had stopped arranging her cottage around the wolf and started arranging the wolf around her cottage. She dragged an old quilt to the hearth and stabbed a finger at it until Beans lowered himself onto it with the wounded dignity of a duke being asked to sleep in a pantry. She put water in a cracked blue basin and slid it beside him. When he stared at the basin as if it had committed treason, she tapped the rim with a spoon. That is your bowl. Do not make that face. It was good enough for soup before you arrived and turned my floor into a battlefield painting. Beans drank from it. Mara pretended not to feel victorious. She established rules. No bleeding on the threshold. No looming behind her while she chopped herbs. No attempting to steal butter from the table with the delicate stealth of a collapsing wardrobe. Most importantly, no climbing onto her bed, which became relevant on the fourth morning when she woke to find two enormous front paws on the blanket and one golden eye studying whether the rules were legally binding. Mara sat up and pointed toward the hearth. Off. I do not care how wounded, handsome, or tragically moonlit you think you are. That bed is mine, Beans, and you are already wearing half the forest. He backed down, one paw at a time. Good. We are learning civilization. By then, Mara had learned several things. Beans was not dying. Beans was too intelligent. Beans understood the word medicine and hated it. Beans could look noble while refusing broth, which was an achievement she had previously seen only in wealthy men with gout. Most importantly, Beans stared. He stared while she chopped roots. He stared while she measured tinctures. He stared while she ate breakfast and guarded her toast from a wolf who had developed suspicious interest in butter. On the third morning, Mara set down her knife. Where I come from, it is rude to stare at a woman like you're composing a tragic ballad about her collarbone and losing money on the chorus. Beans blinked from his blankets. Do not play innocent. You have the face of a tax collector who has seen a secret. His tail moved. Mara pointed at it. Was that sarcasm? The tail stopped. I knew it. She started doing small things without deciding to. She wiped mud from his paws before letting him near the quilt. She saved the least burned edge of her oatcake and tossed it toward him, then scolded him for catching it too gracefully. No one likes a show-off before breakfast. Once, while passing behind him with a basket of clean linen, she scratched the spot behind his ear because his head was in the way and her hand was apparently treacherous. Beans went completely still, his eyes half closed. Mara froze too. Do not enjoy that. I did not authorize a bonding moment. His tail struck the floor once. Do not wag at me either. It weakens my argument. Kale understood every word. That was becoming a problem. He should have left as soon as he could stand. Moonreach needed him. His council would be fracturing. Whoever had arranged the ambush would be using his absence like a crowbar. But the treated silver had locked his shift in place. His human form felt like a door barred from the other side. And Mara Valle was his mate. His wolf had known from the mud, the rain, and the first vicious insult. It knew every time she came near with clean bandages. It knew when she grumbled over his fever. It knew when she threatened to pour medicine down his throat with a funnel. Mate, it said, with increasing lack of subtlety. Kale said nothing. Mara was human. She did not smell the bond. She did not feel the pull under the skin. She did not know that when she touched his fur, every wounded part of him wanted to lean closer, and every honorable part of him fought not to. He would not put fate in her hands, like a trap. So he stayed Beans. Mara treated him accordingly. She checked his teeth on the 4th day, because she found blood near his gum, and apparently had no survival instinct. Kale opened his mouth only after she threatened to assume head rot and dose him with something stronger. She leaned in, fingers warm at his jaw, utterly unafraid of the teeth that had ended challengers. Good grief. You could bite through a door. He could. Do not bite through my door. He would not. Or my neighbor Gerald. I know he is irritating, but legally I cannot prescribe being eaten. A rough breath escaped him. It was almost a laugh. Mara pulled back, eyes bright with triumph. Beans, were you laughing at Gerald's rash? Kale closed his mouth too late. Shameful. I knew you had personality under all that dramatic staring. The days that followed should have been humiliating. They were humiliating. Kale was the Alpha King of Moonreach, and Mara brushed knots from his fur while calling him your immense hairiness. She told him his brooding profile made him look like a nobleman waiting for a portrait. She accused him of faking sleep whenever he did not want medicine. She diagnosed his low warning growl as possible stomach gas. When he followed her from room to room, she called it supervised recovery and told him he was worse than Mrs. Fenwick's sheepdog, who at least had the decency to look stupid while being underfoot. When he blocked the front door because he heard cartwheels outside, she patted his nose with 2 fingers and ordered him to stop being a furry barricade. I appreciate the commitment, but if I wanted a door with opinions, I would marry a carpenter. Kale had never been patted on the nose in his life. His wolf found it wonderful. Kale found that alarming. Mara also began using the phrase, leave it, whenever he showed too much interest in butter, meat pies, or Gerald limping up the path with another rash complaint. The first time she said it, Kale's entire soul recoiled. The 3rd time, he obeyed before thinking. That was when he knew the poison had done permanent damage to his dignity. The worst part was that he began to enjoy it. Not the medicine. The medicine tasted like swamp regret. He enjoyed her. Mara moved through the cottage like a storm that knew where everything belonged. She muttered at herbs as if they were lazy apprentices. She burned her thumb on the kettle, insulted the kettle, then apologized because it had not technically attacked her. She talked too much when she was tired and became louder when she was worried. She never softened herself to be acceptable. Everyone around Kale softened or hardened. Guards lowered their eyes. Counselors measured words. Enemies watched for weakness. Mara did none of that. She saw a large injured creature and treated him like an idiot who needed saving from his own body. It was unbearable. It was the most peace he had known in years. One afternoon, while she combed his shoulder, her voice lost some of its bite. The town likes useful strange, she said. Fever tea strange. Stitch a wound strange. Turn a calf during birth strange. But if Strange talks back, suddenly everyone clutches their pearls and remembers church. Kale heard the ache under the joke. His wolf shoved at him. Go! To her. Kale shifted closer and rested his head against her knee. Mara went still. Her hand hovered above his fur. Do not make a habit of being sweet. It will confuse my professional assessment. He huffed. Yes, very tragic, very noble, very misunderstood. I have met goats with the same expression. But her hand settled between his ears, gentle and absent, and Kale closed his eyes. That night, the assassin came. Mara heard the branch snap outside before Beans lifted his head. That told her enough. She knew the difference between deer, fox, drunk villager, and man trying not to sound like a man. Beans rose too quickly. His bandage pulled. Pain flashed through his eyes, then vanished under a growl that shook the floorboards. Absolutely not, Mara whispered. You sit. He moved between her and the door. Beans. The growl deepened. Outside, a shadow crossed the window. A blade glinted pale under the moon. The same bitter metal smell from Beans's wounds slid through the crack under the door. Silver poison. Fear arrived. Mara accepted it, then stepped around it. Fear was information. Panic was a useless guest. She grabbed the clay jar of foxglove smoke from the hearth shelf and lifted a finger at Beans. If you tear your stitches, I will sedate you with enough valerian to embarrass a bear. The latch moved. Mara threw the jar into the fire. White smoke belched upward. She clapped a wet cloth over her mouth and kicked the door open just as the man outside raised his blade. He expected a frightened woman. He got smoke in the face and a copper kettle to the wrist. The blade fell. Mara hit him again, because once was a warning and twice was education. Beans came through the doorway like a storm with teeth. The intruder saw him and went white. Beans pinned him in the mud with one massive paw on his chest. He did not bite, though Mara saw how badly he wanted to. "Alive," she said. Beans did not move. "I need him alive, you overgrown rug." Slowly, he lifted his paw enough for the man to breathe. Mara crouched beside the dropped blade. A strip of blue thread clung to the hilt, too fine for a hunter and too expensive for anyone sensible. The poison on the blade smelled like the shards she had pulled from Beans. "Someone important wants my patient dead," she said. "That is inconvenient. I already have plans this week." The man tried to speak. Beans leaned down and showed all his teeth. The man decided silence had many virtues. Mara tied him to the fence, treated his bruised wrist because apparently professionalism was a disease, and sent Gerald's oldest boy for the constable at dawn. Then she changed Beans's torn bandage with hands sharper than usual. "You know what sent him," she said. Beans said nothing. The silence was not animal silence. It was a choice. Mara sat back and stared at him. "What are you?" Beans closed his eyes. The answer came 2 mornings later, naked and furious in front of her hearth. Mara entered with fever tea, a bowl of mash, and a lecture about patients who pretended sleep was treatment. She stopped so abruptly that tea sloshed over her fingers. There was no wolf on the rug. There was a man. A very large man, half kneeling amid the old blankets, dark hair falling around a face made of hard lines and worse decisions. His ribs were wrapped in her bandages. His eyes were the same impossible gold. The blanket was not large enough for the amount of man involved. Mara looked at him. He looked at Mara. The kettle seemed to hold its breath. Mara turned around. "I am going to count to 10. Behind her, the man made a rough sound. It might have been pain. It might have been what remained of his dignity leaving his body. "By 10, she continued, setting the tea down with care, "you will either find trousers, become a wolf again, or arrange that blanket with more commitment." His voice came low and hoarse behind her. "I cannot shift yet." Mara closed her eyes. Of course he could talk. Worse, the pause after her next question made it clear he had understood her the entire time. 1, she said. He found her father's old clothes in the chest by the wall. Mara gave him 2 full counts to 10, because she was generous and because she had no desire to see whatever was currently happening with that blanket. When she turned, the trousers were too short, and the shirt strained across his shoulders. He stood beside the hearth like a dethroned storm wearing laundry from a smaller weather system. Mara pointed at the chair. "Sit before you fall over and become my problem twice." His jaw tightened. "I do not fall over." "Beans!" The name hit him like a thrown cup. Mara saw the offense, the shock, and something inconveniently close to amusement. "Yes," she said. "Beans. Unless you prefer Lord Florrug in your current condition." He sat. Not because she ordered him, she suspected. Because his knees were considering betrayal. His name was Kael. He was a werewolf, which Mara had already gathered around the time her patient became an unclothed man on her hearth. He had been attacked with treated silver, and the poison had damaged his ability to shift. When she asked who had done it, his first answer was too smooth. Mara narrowed her eyes. You do not know, or you are hoping I will be satisfied with the shorter answer. Kale studied her, recalculated, and admitted the attacker had to be someone with access to his movements. Someone close. Likely, someone important. Mara handed him fever tea. He objected to the smell. She agreed that it smelled like swamp water. Healing often did. You have survived because I dragged you uphill in the rain and removed poisoned silver from your side while you glared at me like a tragic cathedral statue. Drink the swamp water. Kale drank. One eye tightened. Excellent. Terrible enough to work. Having a man in the cottage was worse than having a wolf. The wolf had taken up more floor space. The man took up more air. Kale moved carefully, spoke little, and tried not to crowd her, which somehow made the cottage feel smaller. When he watched her grind herbs, the silence between them filled with things Mara did not know how to name. He also developed opinions. Kale did not like her going into town alone. Mara informed him that men wearing borrowed trousers and drinking swamp tea did not get to command the person measuring their medicine. His concern remained, but he learned to place it more carefully. That mattered. The assassin at her door had frightened him more than he admitted. She could see it in the way he watched the windows and angled his body toward the door whenever hoofbeats sounded on the road. He was trying to protect her. He was also trying very hard not to make the protection feel like a cage. That mattered more. Kale noticed things no one in town bothered to notice. He saw when her wrist ached after hauling water. He saw when she skipped supper because old Mrs. Annick needed the last bread more. He saw the village women fall silent at the well and start whispering again when Mara walked away. He did not ask foolish questions. One evening, he simply put a bowl of stew in front of her. Careful, Mara warned. That sounded dangerously like concern. The almost smile on his mouth disappeared. He told her there were things he had not told her. Mara was not surprised. He had the atmosphere of a locked cabinet with trust issues. What she asked was simpler, whether he was dangerous to her. His answer came before breath. No. The things hunting him were another matter. Mara crossed to the shelf and unfolded the cloth where she had saved the evidence. The blackened silver shards lay beside the blue thread and a smear of dried residue from the assassin's blade. Lapis dye, she said. Expensive, used by people who enjoy uniforms no one can wash properly. The poison had winter aconite, ash salt, and something I could not identify until yesterday. Moonfern resin. Kale's hand closed around the table edge. Moonfern grows only in Moonreach gardens. I was hoping you would say something less ominous. Before he could answer, hooves struck the yard. Not one horse. 3. Kale rose so fast the chair hit the wall. Pain crossed his face, but he ignored it. Mara had a knife in her hand before she realized she had moved. A male voice called from outside, controlled and exhausted. Your Majesty? Mara looked at Kale. Kale closed his eyes. Oh, she said. That kind of locked cabinet. Rowan Vale, commander of the Moonreach Guard, entered the cottage and immediately ruined the dignity of the moment by staring at Kale's trousers. His gaze traveled from the 2 short hems to the strange shirt, then to Mara's herb-stained apron, and finally back to the missing Alpha King. Rowan's expression fought a brief war between relief, horror, and the professional instinct not to laugh. Your Majesty, he managed. Mara turned to Kale. Your Majesty! Kale's jaw set. Mara. No, let us enjoy this. I dragged royalty through mud, called him beans for 2 weeks, checked his teeth, and threatened him with a medicine funnel. I need a moment. Rowan made a sound that died quickly when Kale looked at him. Mara noticed that too. The way Rowan stood. The way the guards behind him lowered their eyes. The way Kale, in borrowed human clothes, suddenly carried enough authority to make the room remember caution. Alpha King. It should have frightened her. Perhaps it would later. For now, it made her angry. You could have told me. Kale did not hide behind rank. That saved him from the worst of her temper. I could not shift. I could barely stand. I did not know who had betrayed me. Mara reminded him that he had been able to talk for a week and still chose not to mention the king part. He accepted the blow. I did. Why? There was more than one answer behind his eyes. Mara could feel him choosing the one that would not push too hard. Because everyone treats a king differently. You did not. The words landed in the cottage and stayed there. Mara hated that they worked on her. She shoved the stew toward him. Eat, your majesty. You are still pale, and I am still irritated. Rowan explained the rest while Kale ate. Moonreach had been in quiet unrest for months. The council was divided. Someone had leaked Kale's travel route during a private inspection of northern roads. The ambush used silver poison refined in a way only palace stores could support. In Kale's absence, Lord Malrek of the Inner Council had begun pressing for emergency regency powers. Mara listened, arms folded, then tapped one finger beside the blue thread. Does Lord Malrek wear blue? Rowan confirmed it. Malrek's household also had access to the apothecary who could reach moonfern resin. Convenient, Mara said. Kale's voice came low from the table. It was not proof. No, it is a trail. Proof is what we get when arrogant men think nobody is looking at their hands. He realized then that she intended to come to Moonreach. Mara reminded him that someone had tried to murder her patient. When Kale repeated the word patient with far too much softness, she warned him not to get sentimental. She was furious in a medical capacity. For one unguarded second, the king disappeared and beans looked out from behind his eyes. Mara looked away first. They left the next morning. Moonreach rose from the mountains like a crown made of stone and winter light. Silver banners snapped over the gate. Wolves watched from the walls in human form, and some not entirely human, their eyes flashing gold as the returning king passed beneath the arch. Mara rode beside him on Rowan's spare mare, medicine bag across her chest and temper pulled tight as wire. People stared. Of course they stared. She was human, mud-hemmed, carrying clinking jars, with a braid coming loose and a king beside her who kept angling his horse as if to shield her from every pair of eyes. Mara muttered for Kale to stop making himself into a wall. He pointed out that there were many people. I have noticed. Several have faces. Very alarming. His mouth tightened. They are assessing you. Good. I am assessing them back. Your gate guard has a knee problem. The woman by the fountain is pretending not to cry, and the man in the green cloak has the moral posture of a weasel. Kale's gaze moved toward the man in green. That is Lord Malrek. Of course it is. The council assembled within the hour. Mara had seen village meetings, church disputes, inheritance arguments, and once a fight over whether a rooster could legally belong to two households if it crowed on both fences. The Moonreach Council was the same animal, dressed in better fabric. They met in a long hall roofed with dark beams and hung with banners. Kale refused the carved chair at the far end, which looked like a throne and clearly thought highly of itself. He stood with Mara at his right and Rowan at his left. The room did not like Mara. An older woman with silver hair looked her over as if humans were a stain needing classification. A broad man near the hearth whispered. Lord Malrek smiled with the exact warmth of a knife laid on velvet. He spoke first, of course. Malrek called Kale's return a relief, then turned smoothly to the irregularity before them. A human healer. Unknown to the court, full of accusations implied by scraps, stains, and folk remedies. Perhaps His Majesty's judgment had been affected by poison, injury, or other influence. Not accusation, suggestion. Cowardice wearing gloves. Kale went still. Mara stepped forward before he could speak. My influence mostly involved keeping him alive with boiled roots and telling him not to tear his stitches. If that is dark magic, half the grandmothers in my village should be arrested. Someone near the back made the mistake of snorting. It loosened the room just enough. Malrek's smile did not change. You make light of serious matters. No, my lord. I make light of pompous matters. Serious matters are different. Rowan coughed into his fist. Cale did not move, but pride flashed across his face before he could hide it. Mara set her bag on the council table. Jars clinked. The whispers stopped. Serious is this? She unwrapped the silver shards, the blue thread, and 3 small vials. These came from the Alpha King's wounds and from the blade carried by the man who attacked my cottage. The silver was treated with ash salt, winter aconite, and moonfern resin. Moonfern resin stains skin when mixed with silver oil. Not visibly at first. It takes heat to bring out the mark. The silver-haired woman narrowed her eyes. What kind of mark? Mara poured a few drops from a vial onto linen. Brown-black at the fingertips, usually near the nail beds. It lasts nearly 2 weeks. Malric folded his hands into his sleeves. Mara smiled at him. That was a very educational movement. The hall went quiet. Cale's voice came cold and clear. Lord Malric, show your hands. Malric laughed softly and asked whether the court now obeyed every human hedge healer with a bottle of vinegar. Mara held up the treated linen. You do not need to obey me. You only need to have clean hands. The silver-haired woman rose. I will test him. Malric's smile thinned. Lady Vera, this is absurd. Then absurdity will clear you. Lady Vera crossed the room. Malric drew his hands from his sleeves with the care of a man already losing. The stains were faint, but they were there. Dark crescents at the nail beds of his right hand. The room changed, not loudly. It changed the way weather changes before lightning. Malric moved. Rowan was fast. Cale was faster, injured or not. Mara was already expecting arrogance to become panic, so she kicked Malric's knee from the side with all the practical force of a woman who had hauled a wolf uphill and did not care for formal duels. Malric hit the floor. 2 guards seized him. A tiny vial rolled from his sleeve. Mara picked it up with a cloth, sniffed, and nodded. More silver oil. I assume that is frowned upon. Rowan's voice was dry. Deeply. After that, cowardice did what it usually did when dragged into daylight. It named friends. Malric denied, blamed a servant, and then tried to accuse 3 conspirators who immediately began defending themselves with the panic of men who had not expected the knife to turn. Guards removed them one by one. Lady Vera faced Mara when it was done. You saved the king. Mara wiped her fingers on a cloth. Yes. The simple answer seemed to surprise them more than modesty would have. You also exposed treason in this hall. Also yes. Lady Vera studied her, and her expression sharpened into respect. Moonreach owes you a debt. Mara glanced at Cale. He was watching her with a look that made the hall, the banners, and the entire ancient weight of the mountain seem less important than the space between them. Start with replacing my rug. For one suspended moment, no one moved. Then Rowan laughed. It was not loud, but in that hall it sounded like a door opening. A few guards followed. Even Lady Vera's mouth moved by a fraction. Cale stepped forward. The laughter faded because the king had chosen to speak. Moonreach owes Maravele more than a rug. His voice filled the hall. Mara had heard him speak in her cottage, low and careful. This was different. This was the voice that held packs together through winter and war. She found me when my own court had betrayed me. She dragged me from a road where others would have left a monster to die. She treated wounds made by weapons meant to kill my kind, though she had never seen my kind before. She faced an assassin in her own doorway. She came here, stood before a council looking for reasons to doubt her, and gave us the truth. He turned slightly toward her, not claiming, not touching, not using any bond she could not feel. She is not a weakness brought into Moonreach. She is the reason its king is standing. Mara's throat did something inconvenient. Cale gave her something better than a public claim. Space, choice, respect. Any voice in this hall that speaks of her as a threat will answer to me. Lady Vera lowered her head. One by one, the others followed. Mara stood amid bowing wolves and discovered, with irritation, that she was close to crying. So she looked at Cale and said the first thing that saved her. You are absolutely getting charged for the rug, now. Kale's smile was small, private, and devastating. I expected nothing less. That night, Moonreach tried to give Mara a room. The room had carved bedposts, velvet curtains, a huge fireplace, and a valley view that made her feel she might damage something by breathing. She lasted 12 minutes. Kale found her in the infirmary, reorganizing shelves with the determined fury of a woman defending herself from expensive furniture. Mara explained that the room was larger than her cottage and had 7 pillows. Kale, missing the point, offered to have some removed. No one needed 7 pillows, she told him, unless they were building a defensive wall. She also disliked the bowing. Kale called it gratitude. Mara called it large wolves with shiny eyes, making everything worse. He offered to ask them to stop. Do not ask them to stop. That will make them look at me more. Kale stood between 2 rows of shelves, dressed in black with his hair tied back. He looked like a king again. He also looked like the man who had drunk swamp tea because she told him to. Then what do you want? The question was simple. No command underneath. No assumption. Just a man asking a woman who had upended his court what she wanted in the quiet after. Mara's answer took longer than she liked. I want to understand what I am standing in. His eyes changed, not with surprise, with fear, not for himself, for her. Kale looked down at his hands once. There is something I have not told you. Mara leaned back against the work table. I assumed. You have layers like an onion with trust issues. He almost smiled. When his kind found their mate, he explained, they knew through scent, bond, and instinct. It was real, but it should never be a command. Then he told her he had known when he woke on her floor. The infirmary seemed to grow quieter. Kale did not step closer. I did not tell you because you are human. You could not feel what I felt, and I would not place a fate-shaped burden in your hands while you were trying to keep me alive. I would not have you wonder whether kindness had trapped you. Mara looked at him for a long time. So, when you stared at me like a haunted prince with a head injury, he admitted the rest without dressing it up. When he had stared at her, he had been trying not to say mate. When he slept at her door, he had been trying not to frighten her with how badly he needed to keep her safe. The offended look whenever she called him beans, he insisted, was unrelated. Mara laughed before she could stop herself. You thought I was your fated mate, and I thought you had brain damage. Kale accepted the charge with grave humility. Mara declared it possibly the most ridiculous courtship in recorded history, then ordered him not to look tragic while she thought. He obeyed so quickly that she wanted to kiss him for it, which clarified several things. She had been choosing him for days without naming it. The wolf who guarded her door, the man who drank terrible tea, the king who gave her credit before he gave himself relief. Not because a bond pulled her, not because fate had written anything in a language she could not read. Because she knew him. And she knew enough to want more. Mara made the terms clear. She did not feel what he felt. She had no wolf telling her what to do. If she stayed, it would not be because the moon signed her name without asking. Kale's answer came rough and immediate. He would never ask that of her. Only then did Mara cross the space between them. She told him she liked him, secretive, overprotective, terrible at pretending not to be in pain, too large for most rooms, and stubbornly careful with her freedom. He listened. He learned. He had not tried to turn fate into a leash. So yes, slowly, with conditions, and with full authority to keep calling you beans in private. Kale closed his eyes for 1 second. When they opened, the gold in them was bright and utterly unguarded. He could accept those terms. Then, because he was still Kale, he asked if he could kiss her. The question nearly undid her. Mara allowed it, with a warning that if he tore a stitch, she would stop halfway and get the needle. His laugh was quiet and rough. Then he kissed her. It was not the kiss of a wolf claiming what fate had given him. It was a careful first touch that became less careful when Mara gripped the front of his coat and pulled him closer, because she was not a porcelain figure in a ballad, and patience had its limits. When they parted, she noted that his heart was very fast. Kale told her it was not a wolf thing. At the moment, it was a her thing. "Terrible answer," she murmured against his coat. "Very effective." 3 weeks later, Mara returned to her cottage to find a new rug. Not just a rug, a magnificent rug. Thick, soft, deep green. Large enough to cover most of the front room and expensive enough that Mara stood in the doorway with both hands on her hips for a full minute. Kale waited behind her with the patience of a man who had faced trial by counsel and still feared one human woman's opinion of interior decisions. Mara rejected the rug on principle. Kale reminded her that she had asked for a replacement. She informed him that she had asked for a rug, not a treaty with sheep. He defended it as practical, royal, and warm. Mara crouched and pressed one hand into it. The rug was, traitorously, perfect. Her cottage had been cleaned while she was at Moonreach. The bloodstains were gone. The broken stool had been replaced. Her shelves had not been rearranged, which meant Cal had either supervised with impressive attention or threatened someone. The hearth was lit. Her kettle waited on its hook. Her jars lined the shelf in their proper disorder. Home, almost. Not the same home as before. There was too much of him in it now. A spare dark cloak over the chair, a pair of boots by the door, a stack of Moonreach correspondence on her table, because apparently kings could not stop being kings even when recovering in cottages. Mara found that she did not mind. Cal removed his coat and draped it over the chair as if he had done it 100 times. He was stronger now, nearly healed, and still too large for the cottage. She liked that too. When he asked if she intended to judge the rug all evening, Mara announced she was considering naming it. He asked her not to. Unfortunately, he was too late. "It is now Lord Floor Rug II. Kale looked toward the ceiling. "There is no dignity in this house. There is excellent tea, a warm fire, and a healer who knows where you are ticklish." His eyes returned to her at once. "You would not. I dragged the Alpha King uphill in the rain. Do not test my ambition." For the first time, she saw him fully laugh in her cottage. Not the controlled sound he allowed in council halls. A real laugh, warm and startled, and young in a way that made him briefly look like a man who had not carried a crown for 11 years. Mara stood very still. Some things deserved to be witnessed properly. He noticed. He noticed everything. Mara crossed the room and picked up the medicine bowl from the shelf. "You still need this twice a day for another week." Kale's expression changed with gratifying horror. Mara did not let him argue. He was king-shaped, she told him, not healed. He sat on the new rug beside the hearth instead of the chair. The choice was deliberate. Mara saw it, and something inside her settled. He could have filled Moonreach with his authority. Here, he sat where Beans had slept, beside her fire, on a rug he had replaced because she demanded it. She handed him the bowl. "Drink, Beans." Kale took it. His mouth twitched at the name. No offense this time, only recognition. He accepted the bowl as his healer commanded. Mara called him a good man. His mouth twitched as he corrected the category to wolf, and she allowed that this was occasionally true. He drank the medicine and made the same subtle face he had made the first time. Mara laughed before she could help it. He set the bowl aside, then caught her hand before she could retreat. Not gripping, asking. She let him hold it. The fire burned low and steady. Outside, the forest moved in the evening wind. Somewhere far beyond the trees, Moonreach waited with its towers and councils and shining-eyed wolves learning, not always gracefully, that their king's human healer was not going away. Mara looked around the cottage. Her herbs. His cloak. The ridiculous rug. The repaired door. Kale asked whether it felt strange to be back. Mara thought of Moonreach's grand rooms, the council's bows, Lady Vera's stiff respect, Rowan's dry humor, and the road where fate had arrived bleeding and inconvenient and still had the manners to wait for her answer. It was strange. So was wanting both places. Cale accepted that without flinching. They would do both, he said. It would not be simple. The council would complain, Rowan would make schedules, Lady Vera would pretend not to approve, and her village would gossip itself into a fever. Mara added that Gerald would certainly ask whether werewolf saliva cured rashes. Cale promised, very gravely, not to provide any. That was wise. Silence came after that, soft and easy. Not empty. Full. Mara leaned against his shoulder. He went still for one old reflexive second, as if happiness were a thing that might vanish if startled. Then he breathed out and wrapped an arm around her. The gesture was careful, certain, home-shaped. Mara warned him that if he ever almost died in the road again, he should try to do it closer to the cottage. Dragging him had been extremely inconvenient. Cale's chest moved under her cheek, and he promised to keep that in mind. She also required clothes for any future transformation in her house, and no more secrets shaped like thrones. His arm tightened by a fraction. No more secrets shaped like thrones. Mara closed her eyes. The fire warmed her boots. The new rug was absurdly soft beneath them. The Alpha King of Moonreach sat on her floor as if there were nowhere in the world he would rather be. She had no wolf to tell her what destiny wanted. No ancient bond singing under her skin. No moonlit certainty written into her bones. She had rain, mud, blood, bad tea, a ruined rug, an impossible man, and the slow, stubborn knowledge of her own heart. That was enough. For Mara Vali, who trusted work more than omens and choice more than fate, it was better than enough. It was home.